Good morning. Here's your Intel report for Monday, December 5, 2022. Inside the Beltway. White House, President Biden is scheduled to host the congressional ball this evening. Domestic Intel summary. President Biden signed legislation passed by the House and Senate imposing a contract deal on rail workers and averting a possible rail strike that could have happened as soon as December 9. The Federal Reserve heads into its December meeting in less than 2 weeks, and a strong November jobs report will impact the Fed decision on a further rate increase. The Commerce Department found Chinese solar firms evading tariffs, and the Senate Majority Leader is pushing for a ban on the use of Chinese-made semiconductors by federal contractors. A Commerce Department decision on tariff evasion by the Chinese solar manufacturers will impact the implementation of green energy policies relying on solar as a source for renewable energy. Vandalism of power substations in North Carolina. Federal and state law enforcement are assisting local authorities in Moore County, North Carolina, in investigating intentional vandalism of power substations that left 45,000 households and businesses without power. Moore County Sheriff said that the suspect or suspects shot at 2 Duke Energy power substations, disabling them and resulting in a blackout. I have a few important points. First, although law enforcement agencies say they're still searching for suspects and a motive, social media reaction has largely blamed unnamed right-wing activists for attacking the power substations to stop a local drag queen show. So far, this is speculation based on some cryptic social media posts made by Emily Rainey, a former Army officer also involved in the J6 protest. Rainey leads Moore County Citizens for Freedom, a conservative activist group. The Moore County Sheriff said that his deputies questioned Rainey and have so far not found any connection between her and the attack. Second, the most immediate impact is that this event is being classified as domestic terrorism, which will bolster the Biden administration's warnings that right-wing groups are a danger to the country. While we await official reports from investigators, expect additional calls to boost domestic violent extremist, or DVE, program focus and funding. Third, attacks against critical infrastructure like power substations have been a core element of the so-called accelerationist movement, which seeks to accelerate a U.S. collapse and kick off a civil war. While accelerationism has a wide range of political and ideological affiliations, everything from explicitly neo-Nazi groups to white nationalists and the anarchist and libertarian-oriented Boogaloo movement, it's most often associated with right-wing activism. I suspect the greatest efforts behind the accelerationist movement, especially on the most popular Telegram channels, are possibly run by federal law enforcement as a honeypot to attract would-be terrorists. Accelerationist leaders in recent years have complained about the lack of accelerationist attacks against critical infrastructure. We'll have a follow-up to the accelerationist reaction to the Moore County attacks in tomorrow's report. Biden signs bill to avert rail strike. President Biden signed a bill imposing a contract deal on rail workers averting a possible rail strike. The Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division, BMWED, said it was disappointed in Biden's decision to push for intervention before the December 9 deadline. MUD spokesman Clark Bellew said bargaining for the next contract in 2024 could begin in early 2023. Jobs report released. Consumer spending increased in October. The economy added 263,000 jobs in November, down from 284,000 jobs added in October. According to the Washington Post, economists are concerned that job and wage growth will push the Federal Reserve to continue raising rates and increase the risk of a recession. Adjusted for inflation, consumer spending increased by 0.5% from September to October, the largest increase since January. The Personal Consumption Expenditures, PCE, price index, a key inflation measure followed by the Federal Reserve, rose 6% in October. Oil imports from Saudi Arabia drop. Oil imports from Saudi Arabia fell to 83,000 barrels per day, the lowest since 2017, from 387,000 per day in October. That number could increase for November as ships hauling 18 million barrels of oil from Saudi Arabia have not yet signaled their final destinations. Commerce Department finds tariff evasion, manufacturing orders down. According to the Department of Commerce, Chinese solar manufacturers are evading U.S. trade enforcement duties by conducting minor assembly in 4 Southeast Asian countries before their products are exported to the United States. U.S. manufacturing orders in China are down 40%. According to supply chain research firm Project 44, total vessel container volume from China to the U.S. declined 21% between August and November. U.S. companies oppose Ndaa chip ban. Senate Majority Leader Schumer, Democrat New York, said he wants the final National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, bill to bar federal contractors from using Chinese-made semiconductors. Industry groups oppose the ban, saying it is too broad as written. In a letter to Congress, 19 industry groups voiced concerns about how to determine the source of all chips in electronic products they might buy, saying that the 4-year implementation period in the NDAA amendment is not sufficient. Geostrategic Intel Summary. Yuletide strikes to cripple UK near Christmas. Labour strikes driven by poor pay and working conditions have reached a new high in the United Kingdom, with major protests scheduled daily until Christmas. Significant disruptions to services throughout the UK are expected as strike actions spread across major industrial and transportation sectors. Holiday travel, strikes by railway workers, airline ground handlers, bus drivers, and national highway workers are expected to paralyze transportation routes. A complete disruption of the national health system is also expected as 3 unions representing 470,000 ambulance workers have voted to strike, with union representatives indicating a planned strike date that will correlate with a strike by 200,000 nurses scheduled for December 20th. Disruption is expected to peak on December 16th, when 10 major strikes will coincide, effectively crippling the country. UK media outlets indicated additional strikes are likely as several other major workers' unions, including 3 related to the NHS, are currently voting on strike actions. Further concurrent strikes impacting the national healthcare system could trigger a request for the domestic deployment of Defence Ministry resources to bolster patient care resources during the growing crisis. The dispersal of labour strikes across the UK's social strata is indicative of the increasing desperation of ordinary citizens amid rising inflation. This provides an early warning indicator of similar social upheavals spreading across Europe as inflation and energy costs continue to soar heading into the winter. Secretary of Defense Austin, B-21 to offer battlefield management. On Friday, the U.S. Air Force introduced the world's first 6th-generation aircraft. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was one of the keynote speakers and claimed that the B-21 would be the most maintainable bomber ever built. He also said that it could gather intel, offer battlefield management, and integrate with our allies. Christening a new project with out-of-scope demands is likely to overburden missions and budgets while failing to realize the potential of its core competencies. The Defense Department did this previously with the littoral combat ship projects, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and F-35 Joint Strike Fighters. DoD official, budget needs to cover inflations and munitions. In a recent interview, Department of Defense Comptroller Mike McCord said the fiscal year 2024 budget should account for record inflation and focus on munitions key for the defense of Taiwan. McCord's plan for inflation includes bumping up payments to fixed-price contractors. Russia-NATO Situation Report. Vučić, Serbia, Kosovo license plate war at a boiling point. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić said the ongoing crisis with Kosovo over license plates had reached a boiling point. Citing illegal actions taken by the Kosovo government that caused an escalating crisis, Vučić denounced Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti, saying that Serbs will no longer put up with Kurti's terror. Vučić's comments were met with approval by the Russian ambassador to Serbia, who praised the statements as decent and reasonable before accusing Kosovo of fomenting tensions at the behest of the West. UK rejects new Chinese embassy plans. Councillors in London's Tower Hamlet rejected a bid by the Chinese government to construct a new super embassy. Chinese government officials previously purchased a 5-acre plot of land across the street from the Tower of London in 2018 in preparation for constructing a new facility that would be 10 times the size of its existing embassy. Citing public safety and concern that the new building would become a secret police station in the heart of London, councillors voted unanimously against Chinese planning permissions allowing for development at the site. Iran to participate in CSTO Parliament. Iran sent a delegation to participate in the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, parliament as an observer. Iran has a history of being invited to apply for observer status and membership to the CSTO. Russia invited them as a special guest in 2015. China and Indo-Pacific Situation Report. 11 To visit Saudi Arabia amid shifting strategic environment. Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit Saudi Arabia this week amid the Saudis' possible shift away from the United States. Watchers expect leaders from the two countries to strike cooperation deals on energy and trade. Biden campaigned on turning Saudi Arabia into a pariah state, while also telling Saudi and other Arab leaders that the United States remains strategically committed to the region. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman let his frustrations with Biden policies be known earlier this year when he floated the idea of pricing oil in Chinese yuan. While Arab countries, especially the Saudis, want to avoid being forced to choose sides, the Saudis' openness to striking a strategic cooperation deal with the Chinese is a shot across the Biden foreign policy bow. China implements emergency media censorship over protests. Authorities from the Cyberspace Administration of China declared a Level 1 Internet emergency response, implementing the country's highest censorship levels in response to ongoing protests over zero-COVID policies. Citing violent protests and political criticism, both domestically and internationally, authorities have called for additional action to silence the critics. The directive increases government efforts to eliminate public use of VPNs and other methodologies of bypassing the government's Great Firewall Internet control measures, encourages strong control over content related to COVID protests, and recommends reporting such activities so they may be dealt with. End report.